Assignments with Leshay Pillay. Today we will be looking at the final part for my semester 1 POE for programming. So essentially I'll be taking you through the whole POE, which is made up of part 1, part 2 and part 3. Obviously before this there was videos on part 1 and part 2, which we will still go through briefly as it all links up to this final part of the POE. And yes, let's get right into it. So let me open my NetBeans. And here you can see I have all my tabs opened for this entire POE. So let us just look at all the tabs. So essentially the first one is the main POE, which is the main class, which has all of the main coding, which does most of the executions, which has most of the prompts. Then we're going to go into these three tabs, which are the three subclasses. This is the array class, which was part of the POE final part 3. Yes, and then we have the messages. This was part of POE part 2. This was a subclass for that part. And then we have login, which was the subclass for the first part of the POE. And then obviously we have our unit testing classes. This is array class test, which is the tab for the final part of the POE, which is essentially all the unit testing for all, well, not all, some of the methods in the array subclass. Then we have message test, which is a unit testing folder once again for part 2 of the POE. And then lastly we have this tab login test, which is a JUnit testing for the POE part 1 subclass. Alright, so let me just quickly run through the code before I get into the workflow of the code and how the program actually works. So here you can see this is the beginning of part 1. We have all the imports that we need for part 1. And then we just have our public static void main. This is how we know it's our main class. Then we have some prompting, our scanners, some variables. Then we have just some normal questions to make the user interface more nice and easier for users to understand. Then we have some while loops that check usernames, passwords, numbers, things like that, essentially to make sure that the application works correctly. And yeah, this is for the password, cell number. Then obviously we just have some normal error flags that flag the user if they are doing anything incorrect on the application. Then obviously you can see throughout we are calling some of the methods that we actually made in the login class over here, which we'll briefly go through later on. And then yeah, then we have the login feature of the POE, which essentially ensures that the user does remember their password and username and inputs it correctly in order for the user to use the application. Then here's just asking the user to enter the username, password. It double checks it, and then it actually starts the main application, which we looked at in part 2 of the POE. Here we see some more variables for part 2 of the POE. Then we start the actual application. Now this application is called Quick Chat, and it gives the users 4 options. Now in part 2 we just had the first 3 options, which was option 1, send messages, option 2, to show recently sent messages, and option 3, to close the application. But now POE part 3 focused mainly on option 4, stored messages, which we will get to later on. Okay, then you can even see that we had to integrate some of the POE part 3 stuff over here. You can see that we made an instance of then array class called summon, which we use to call our methods. It had to obviously be integrated into the part 2 because of this option 4, which is what POE part 3 is about. Okay, then obviously we can see we have some generic questions like number of messages that would like to be sent, and yeah, then we can, oh, but before we get to that, we can actually see that this is one of our first options that the user can pick from. So if they do choose to send a message, this is all of this that falls under this if statement falls for that option. So obviously they can choose how many messages they would like to send, and then these arrays is for part 3. We'll get back into this later, but essentially these arrays are used to store certain things, like all the messages, for instance, this first array, and then we have only sent messages, which is this array, and then we have deleted messages, which is this array. Okay, then we have this while loop that allows the user to enter the recipient number, because obviously for the app to work we need to know who we are sending the message to. So this is what this essentially does, and obviously it has a checker to see if the cell number is correct length, and that us as QuickCheck can use this information that the user inputs. Okay, then we have another for loop here, which is just essentially all part of the main bigger picture, which is option 1, sending messages. Allows just to make the application seem more lucrative and easier to use. So this just makes it all more simpler. And obviously our application has some limitations such as message length, so obviously we had to incorporate that here, where we have a checker for the message length. And yeah, then we can continue on to see another while loop that gives us another set of menu stuff, which the user can use when he or she has typed a message, which is to either send the message, disregard the message, or store the message. So obviously it just has the prompts here for the user, stores the user's input, and then that's what we use. We use what the user would like to do with the message, and then that's how we continue the application. So if the user would like to send the message, it obviously just sends the message straight. It provides a message saying that the message was sent, as well as provides some message information, which we can see over here. But if the user decides to obviously delete the message, which is here, this option here, then it just tells the user that the message was successfully deleted, and that's all. Obviously no message information will be generated for that, as the user will not be using the messages later. And then here for the third option when sending a message is to store the message for later use. And here this is where part 3 gets incorporated a lot, but for the time being we can just see when a user stores the message, it obviously provides message information, because if the user is storing the message, they are obviously going to be using it at a later stage, so it still needs message information, right? And the way we incorporate our application is that when a user selects to store a message, it gets stored in a JSON file. And we keep that JSON file with us, obviously, in case the user would like to come back to application later and look for a stored message and send a message. So that's why we have this feature on our application. Okay, then obviously we have this feature of the application which counts the amount of messages that the user sends, so that they're just wary, they know and they understand what they're doing with our application. Then we have the bigger picture questions again, like if option 2 was if the user wanted to look at, if I'm not mistaken, it was look at previously sent messages. We have a system.outprint here to tell the user that this feature is obviously still in development and is coming soon as per the rubric of the POE. And then the third option was if the user would like to leave the application after logging in and just be done with it for then and there. It just says thank you for visiting our app and the application ends, which is what this break does here. Now we are getting into the juicy stuff, which is POE final part 3. As you can see here, I did mention that a lot of not a lot, but some of the code was integrated above, but most of it is below actually. Now let us begin. So obviously here's the main picture, big picture option, which is stored messages. Now in this big picture question, there is a number of things a user can do with a stored message, and over here we can actually see the number of things, which is A, display the sender and recipient of all stored messages, B, display the longest stored message, C, search for a message or recipient number using the message ID, D, search for all messages sent to specific recipient number, and then E, delete a stored message using the message hash, which is obviously message information. And once again, this is why we assign message information to a stored message. And then finally F, display a full report of all stored messages information. Okay, so this is what option 4 does. It gives the user a choice on what action they would like to do with their stored messages. Now I'm sure you're assuming what is this above here. Now this is known as parallel arrays. Essentially, these arrays work together to incorporate all the information from the JSON file into arrays so that us as the coders of the quick chat application can utilize for the user's needs. And yeah, we'll get more into depth of that on how the JSON is written to the array in another tab over here. Okay, and then obviously here we have the methods that are just being called when each option is selected. So this is just if the user selects option A, B, C, D, E, or F, this is what essentially happens. If they pick that specific letter, we call the method, which is all mentioned in the array class. And yeah, this is either delete message. This is a bit more intricate because we have to update arrays, so we can't just call the method here. We have to do some more stuff essentially to update these arrays. And then obviously, yeah, we're just calling the method once again, and then we can see this is the end of semester 1 POE by me and my student number. So just before, I don't want to make this video too long, but just before I get into the running of the application, I would like to show you the array class. So obviously here again we can see my imports, and then here we have the first method, which we don't call in the main actually, but this method essentially stores and keeps count of all the sent messages. So if a message was sent by a user, it will be stored in this array. Same with this method. If a message was deleted by a user, it is stored into this array. And now this method is very different, as this is the method that converts, well, not converts, well, it reads the JSON file and then it converts those items in the JSON file to array objects that we can use in Java. So obviously this had to be done with some research. So here's my code attribution from Stack Overflow, and then here we are essentially just reading the file, checking if the file is empty, then we are creating a new array and setting the size of the array. And here we are actually putting the items from the JSON file that was read into the new array. Okay, now here we have the message hashes array. Now this array, essentially similar to these two up here, all it does is it stores all the message hashes that are created into one array called hash. Same with this one. All this method does is that it stores all of the message IDs that are created when a user types a message. It creates a message ID, and these individual message IDs are stored into this specific array called IDs. Now this isn't necessarily parallel arrays. We only get to parallel arrays when we look at this specific method, where we can see key over here, which represents all the message information as items, and then it is obviously inputted into an array. Then when we get into this method over here, this method essentially looks for all the senders and recipients of messages and prints them out for the user. This is all once again related to main menu option number 4, which is stored messages. This whole class is dedicated to that option. And then we have this one. This method searches for the longest message using indexing in order to print the message for the user so that they understand which is the longest message that they have stored. Maybe they would like to delete it, that's why they need to be able to search for it. Then we have this method, which is searching for the message ID. Now this is where parallel arrays start to get involved, and essentially this method is made so that users can search for message information with just the message ID. So if a user just has the message ID for a message, they can use that ID, type it into the application, and they are able to find the recipient that they sent this to, the exact message that it is, as well as the ID. And yeah, the way this is possible is through parallel arrays. When it was converted from a JSON file to arrays, it was stored in parallel arrays so that each element in each different array is linked. So index number 1 of message ID will be related to index number 1 of recipient, index number 1 of the message, and so forth. Okay, and then obviously we have just some simple application stuff here. If the ID can't be found, then the application already will show the user that the ID that they typed in was not correct. Then we have this method. This method allows the user to search for all the messages sent by a specific user, or sent to a specific user, sorry. Yeah, so if the user would like to see all the messages they send to this number, then they just go type in that number and it brings up all the messages in this format over here, and it provides them with all that information. And again, simple application functions. If they type in the wrong number, it just tells them no messages found for this recipient. Okay, then we have this method, which is used to search for a message that a user would like to delete from the storage. So we don't delete the message from the JSON file, as we would have to rewrite to the JSON file. So that is a bit it's a bit redundant. So we delete it from the array instead. So while the user is using the application, they are able to look at all the messages without seeing that specific one in the case that they wanted to delete it. So obviously we have the normal searching, where we just see if there's, essentially this checks if there is any messages. Then we prompt the user to enter the message hash they would like to delete. it stores it, and then the searching begins. It starts to search for it. If it finds a match, then it updates this variable called delete index. If it doesn't, delete index stays as -1, and obviously the message hash wouldn't have been found if delete index stays the same. And then here we just have formatting purposes and what's being deleted. It provides this to the user so that they can understand. Maybe they have second thoughts. That's why I incorporated this function, which is to confirm their delete. So it prompts the user to make sure that they want to delete this message. And if they don't want to delete the message, then obviously it just says deletion cancelled. But if they do want to go through with it, they would type Y. And then as per normal, the program will continue and new smaller arrays will be created from here that the user's information can be updated for that specific session. If the user logs back in, the message might still be there. And then here it's just obviously updating the new arrays with the old arrays information except for delete index, which was the index that they would like to have deleted. Okay, and yeah, that sums up that method. And lastly, we have this method, which simply generates a full report about each individual message stored, which includes all the message information. So we just loop through each and every loop. In this case, we loop through message ID, but then we link it through parallel arrays. So the matching information can be linked, and that the information can be printed out. And then obviously we just have formatting purposes, and this one is really just a string method which prints out what we as the coders have stored in the JSON file, which has now been converted to an array. Okay, now that this method has been gone through, we can actually look at, well, we've already looked at these subclasses in the previous videos where each method is really explained, which is pretty simple. Here this method was really just a correction method and ensuring that the user inputs the correct information. Same with this one, very simple, very straightforward. It checks the username, checks the password for the first portion of the POE. This one was checking the information for the second portion of the POE. And then here we have our JUnit testing. Now JUnit testing, this was for part 2 of the POE. All of these pass 100%, meaning all the methods are correct in the messages class. Same with this one, the login test. Here we can see code attribution, as this was the first time doing JUnit testing. But again, all these unit testing passes 100%, indicating that this login class methods are all 100%. And for part 3, which was done as of recently, we can see that we have all of these new forms of array unit testing, which is fairly similar to normal unit testing, just including arrays, and yeah, essentially just including arrays and making sure that they are assigned to the correct values for assert equals. And once again, all of these pass 100%. Just for the sake of the video, I will run the first one. But yeah, all of these unit testing runs 100%, indicating that in the array class over here, that every single method there works 100%. And here, as we can see, it passes 100%. Okay, now that we've gone through all of the code and the logic of how it works, let us just do a quick run through of how the application works. Okay, now that the application is up and running, we can start. So obviously this is all part of part 1 stuff, so I'm not going to necessarily test it out and test the waters. I'm just going to be inputting in the correct information, as it does take quite a while to get through the option 4 function for the part 3. But as you can see, the function the whole POE works as per normal. You can see that the username was successfully captured, password was successfully captured when we input the correct information. Obviously, if you put in the wrong information, it would have obviously said not successfully captured. Now for the cell number, I'm going to put in the correct information, and then it says number was successfully captured. Requirements were met, and I have successfully been registered as a user on QuickChat. Now the application would ask me if I would like to log in. Now this is where we see part 2, sorry, of the POE getting incorporated, and we would like to log in, yes. And then here, obviously, in order for us to utilize the application's features, we have to ensure that us as a user are able to remember our password and username. So for the sake of understanding how this will work, we will just input the wrong information. Username, you'll put in wrong. Password, we'll put in wrong. Obviously, this needs to be matching this and this, which we can see does not. So let us just press enter here, and then obviously it says error, your login details are not correct. So let us put in the correct details. And here, obviously it says our login details are correctly matched. It welcomes us as a normal application would. And then we start with the main picture functions. Now, once again, this is all still part of part 2, which was explained in my previous video. But for the sake of the whole POE being explained, let us run through all 4 of these options. So with option 1, it says send messages. Please enter the number of messages that you would like to send. Let us just send 3 messages. Please enter the cell number of the recipient. So who we are sending this to, we will just send it to this random number. Okay, now we are typing our 1 of 3 messages. So this first message, we're gonna say hello, but we're gonna spell it wrong. Let's press enter. Now obviously we pressed enter, we saw we spelled it wrong. Now it's asking us what would we like to do this message. For this message, I think we should delete it because we sent it wrong. So we're going to press 0. Then we can see message successfully deleted. Now we are going to try typing the message hello properly. Enter. Now we want to send this message to our recipient +22711122233. We are going to send it, which is press 1. Then we can see message was successfully sent. Here is the message information: message ID, message hash, recipient cell number, and the message that was sent hello. And now we are going to type in a message that we want to type to this user, but we don't necessarily want to send it today. We want to send it tomorrow, for instance. So we're going to press enter. We don't want to send the message because we don't want to send it now. We don't want to delete the message because we do want to send it, but just not right now. So we are going to press 2, which is to store the message. Now we can see this provided us with some message information. Obviously we see the message was successfully stored. It provides us with message information: the ID of the message, the message hash, the recipient cell number, and the message stored. Let's go to the movies. Okay, then we can see this is the total amount of messages that we sent. Obviously, out of the 3 that we would like to have sent, we just sent 1, so it provides us with 1. Then it brings us back to the main menu options, which is send messages, option 2, show recently sent messages, option 3, quit, option 4, stored message. So let us just quickly look at option 2, show recently sent messages. And as per the rubric, we have this comment that tells the users the feature is still in development, coming soon. We were not able to complete this yet for the POE, so it is obviously still in development. So now we're not going to press option 3 because that is quit, that will end the application. We'll do that last. So we're going to do option 4, stored messages. Now obviously here we can see there's a number of actions that can take place for these stored messages. So let us quickly run through them. So option A, which is display the sender and recipient of all stored messages. A. We're gonna press option A, and here we can see there's 5 stored messages. It says all the stored messages, and then it numbers each messages and puts down the sender and the recipient each time. Obviously the sender will never change as it is your number, so it's just never going to change. And then here, these three were done at a long ago stage when testing the code. This was done on a test run of this video, and this was done now. We were sent this number. We can see that this number is very familiar, as we sent our most recent message. Well, we stored our most recent message and we were going to send it to this number. Okay, that's done. Now let's go to see option B, which is display the longest stored message, which it does for us. The longest message stored, which is let's go and play football next week, which was one, I think, message option number 3 over here. Right, let us continue. We're going to do option C now, which is search for a message or recipient number using the message ID. So it says here's the prompt asking us to enter the message ID to search. So we're going to scroll up and we're going to see the message that we had stored over here. This is the message ID. So we're just going to copy that and paste it in over here. And we're going to press enter. Then obviously you can say the message was found because we just copy pasted the exact ID, which was let's go to the movies. And as you can remember, we did type this message and store it, and we were going to send it to this recipient, but it was stored. Okay, let us move on to the next option, which is option D, which is search for all messages sent to a specific recipient number. Okay, we're gonna press enter. Then we're gonna type in the number. Let's type in this number because obviously we only type this message now to the JSON folder, so this should be the only message that should come up. So let us paste this number here, enter, and obviously you can see message sent to recipient found, the only message that we sent to this number and the only message that we had stored, which is let's go to the movies. Okay, let us move on to option number E, which is delete a stored message using the message hash. Here it says please enter the message hash you would like to delete, which is, let us scroll up, see if we can find the message hash for that same. Here we are. This message was successfully stored. This is the message hash over here. Let us copy this and paste it over here. Now it should automatically find it for us once we press enter, which it does. Message found for deletion, message ID, the recipient number, and the message. This is all linked to the message that we had just stored. This is all thanks to parallel arrays. Now obviously I have added this in, which was not part of the rubric, but it is just a feature I think would have been ideal for this application, which is a confirmation. So we're gonna press yes, we want to delete this message obviously, and then once you press enter it just says message has successfully been deleted. Okay, cool. Now we're going to do the last option on the stored messages, which is F, display report of all stored message information. Once you press enter we can see it gives us a whole breakdown, a full message report of all the messages that we have stored while using this application, all the way up until here, which is the end of the report. And that is essentially the quick chat application. Now for the last big main menu option, which is option 3, quit. Once you press 3, the application ends as a whole and a nice message is given, which is okay, thank you for visiting our app. And that brings us to the end of how this application runs. And just to show what the JSON folder looks like, we can see all 5 of the messages I have typed have been stored here, which is for example, let's go to the movies, which was the one we recently sent, is also here stored in the JSON. And that is just exceptional how the messages can get stored. And that brings us to the end of our video for today. So thank you guys for tuning in with assignments with Leshay Pillay. This project is part of Emeris University, the IIEs, specifically Emeris Sandton. All of this code has been committed within 39 commits. The whole of the POE throughout the whole of semester 1 has been committed and pushed to GitHub. So the link will be under the submission so that the lecturer can mark appropriately. Thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one.